DeSantis last night. He looked very presidential for the. I think he's kind of lacked in that area. But Jennifer yesterday said she thought this was a very big deal. I just don't put much weight into endorsements. But Mark, you disagree?
Yeah. So Kim Reynolds, the governor of Iowa, is by far the most popular politician in that state. If you go to rallies for other candidates and they say her name, just say her name, not even have her on stage, the crowd erupts in cheers. I mean, she is incredibly popular. And Iowa governors and even their U.S. senators have historically not endorsed. And when they have, their candidates have almost always won the caucuses because they have the organization that's inside the state. It'll be interesting because Trump has a fairly large lead there, much smaller than in all the other states. It's a big win for Ron DeSantis, and there's been a lot of public discussion, and DeSantis actually said something about it, I want to say Saturday or Sunday, that he would consider Kim Reynolds on the short list to be vice president of the United States. And, there's your Southern and your Midwestern. That's a pretty good ticket that would be challenging, I think, for Democrats to go against.
Wow. That's a big deal. Now, so how much do we think Trump is up by in Iowa?
I think the last poll I saw, he was at roughly 43%. DeSantis and Haley were both tied at 16.
Well, and of course, we heard the audio, I think.
Thought I saw yesterday, don't hold me to this, I thought I saw he's at 5% now in the national polls, and the threshold to get on the stage is 3 or 4%. So he's now scraping the bottom of making the stage.
Well, and we are expecting a fun debate. That is Wednesday night. We're going to carry that live on KWOS and on the Eagle. So be sure and tune in. The people that we know have made it: Chris Christie, DeSantis, Haley, Ramaswamy, Scott, and of course Trump is qualified. But he said, I've been a bit busy this week.
He's too busy yelling at the judge in the courtroom.
Apparently. So also, Congress is finally getting busy, hopefully, on this spending package. They are putting together a 9-bill spending package. They're calling it not an omnibus, but a maxibus. What? Anybody heard this word before?
I never heard it.
Or the minibus. That was the other one they're coming with. Yeah. Instead of omnibus, now we're down to semi-omnibus, which is a minibus.
We have Congressman Blaine Luetkemeyer coming up next hour. It'll be interesting to ask him about the maxibus, minibus, omnibus thing. I thought the whole reason we got a new speaker was in part because we weren't passing appropriation bills in normal order. And here we are, the first thing the new speaker, after he got the Israel package out, first thing we're talking about is another can't call it an omnibus, but another omnibus package to get funding going.
Well, it's time to do something, so I'm glad we got a new speaker in, and I'm sure we're going to be hearing much more about this spending debate. We've also, Supreme Court is looking at a Second Amendment case today, Mark.
Yeah, big Second Amendment case. Particularly got the left really riled up, but it's a fascinating case in that it deals with domestic violence, and a person who had a domestic violence conviction and was accused of shooting. I think it was
a witness.
Yeah, and under the state law, that was a bar on being able to buy a gun. He sued.
Red flag.
He's now come back and said he doesn't even want the gun. I thought that was an interesting fact pattern. The court could throw it out as moot on the basis that he no longer even wants to have access to the gun. There's no harm.
been injured on the street as part of the protest. What are you hearing? What happened? What can you tell us?
It just shows, this weekend just showed the contrast between the Palestinian side and the Israeli side to me. There was a rally in support of Israel in Clayton, which, of course, is the county seat for St. Louis County. It was a very peaceful rally. It had speeches. People showed solidarity with Israel. In the University City Loop was a pro-Palestinian rally, and that's where all hell broke loose. There is video on Twitter and online, X, where they're showing scenes of pro-Palestinian supporters grabbed an Israeli flag from someone, stomped on it, spit on it, threw it in a trash can. I think some arrests were made. So it just shows, one side is civilized, the other side is barbaric and supports the supports the maiming and killing of babies and children and women and everyone. It's just sickening.
Yeah, Chris, you got the 1st Congressional District up there in Cori Bush, who's been an outspoken supporter of Hamas and the Palestinians. Ironically, in a congressional district that has a really large percentage of Jewish Americans in West County, St. Louis, in that Creve Coeur, Ladue, Clayton area. Mm-hmm. And now you've got Wesley Bell jumping in. What's going to be the ultimate impact up there of, her position in light of what that district looks like?
That's the thing that's been so surprising about her being elected and reelected in the 1st District. As you said, there is a sizable amount of Jewish population in this area. I think she has finally kicked the can or whatever. She, along with 5 other squad members, are going to be primaried this year. So hopefully that fever will break and we can get these people out of here. But I think Wesley Bell, there's another state senator, Brian Williams. There's talk of him jumping in the race. I hope he doesn't, because he'll end up splitting that vote. The 1st Congressional District is going to be Democrat. Republican is probably not going to win that seat. But I would love, and I live in the 1st District, I would love to have a representative that I'm proud of or not ashamed of. And I hope that Wesley Bell can defeat her in the primary. He's got a lot of support among Democratic Jews and the non-progressive type of the sensible Democrats seem to be coming to his side.
Chris, do you really think that Cori Bush's support has eroded that much?
I do. I think that I think among the super progressives, I think we see that they are showing their anti-Semitic clothes and are really who they are. But if you look at a lot of Jewish people are in Congress. They are railing against the Democratic Party. They are railing against their own colleagues about the anti-Semitism, and I think she's got a real chance to lose. I think that her opponent, whoever it is going to be very well funded and may even raise more money than she will.
Off the texter, Sandy says, "Welcome back, Chris."
Thank you.
We're excited to have you back today. Keith is not in such a good mood, and he said, no, he's in a good mood, but he said, man, so Chris, we've been talking about the big endorsement last night with Governor Reynolds endorsing Ron DeSantis, and he said, man, you guys are going to need to have your lips surgically removed from Ron DeSantis's bleep. It's borderline sickening. Now, Mark, I would say, Mark, that's fair. He is all in for DeSantis.
I make no bones about it.
I am not all in for DeSantis, but what are you going to be looking for in Wednesday's debate? And do you make anything of last night's endorsement?
Look, I think the endorsement from the governor of Iowa may be a little bit too late. She probably should have endorsed him months ago. Look, Donald Trump has a 30-point lead. I think this endorsement may drop that to 29.5 points. At this stage, there's no one that looks like can stop Donald Trump. Now, I will be very interested to see Nikki Haley's performance on Wednesday. She's been rising. She's doing very well in New Hampshire. She surpassed DeSantis in Iowa. I'm also hearing Tim Scott is going to come out Wednesday, and he's going to take the gloves off. He's going to go against Haley and both DeSantis. He knows that if he doesn't have a good showing in this debate, it's probably all over for him The next debate, I think you have to have 80,000 individual donors, and you have to have 6% in the polls. And Tim Scott is nowhere near that at this stage. So look for him to be very, very aggressive.
I mean, it seems like everybody would like to see the debate get down to maybe one or two people, and then finally Trump show up to be involved in it so that we can see whether there's a contrast or not between all these folks.
I'd like to see that as well. I mean, you know, I have never in my life, as long as I've been seeing politics, have ever seen a primary election over before the Iowa primary, and that's what it seems like at this stage. Look, Donald Trump is the prohibitive favorite. He's probably going to be the nominee, but I would like to see him challenge. I'd like to see him come to the debates, and who knows, Nikki Haley could surprise us and could surpass him. I doubt that, but I don't want anything to be given to anyone. I don't want Donald Trump to feel he's entitled to the nomination. I want to see him work for it.
What about this recent announcement there in St. Louis from Dr. Bob Onder that he might enter the lieutenant governor's race? That race there's been a lot of action in that race over the last couple of weeks. What do you make of his announcement or pre-announcement?
Dr. Bob is making no bones about it that he feels that Dean Plocher should resign, the House Speaker should resign his speakership, and he has seen that as a weakness, this little controversy that's going around Dean Plocher. So he is probably, as you said, going to throw his hat in the ring for lieutenant governor. Look, I think the House Speaker, Dean Plocher, and I know him, he's a good guy. He's made a mistake here. I think he needs to decide, is he either going to try to keep his speakership or, try to run for lieutenant governor. I think trying to run for both at this stage is probably not going to happen. I would give up the lieutenant governor's race if I was him and focus on trying to save my speakership.
What do you think the House Ethics Committee, because the committee met once already, it's going to meet again. There's some debate about what exactly it's meeting on, but to the extent it covers this Plocher issue, what do you think, what will we see from that?
Look, I think the fact that Speaker Plocher has recused himself from referring it to the committee, I think it was kind of gives us an indication of what they are investigating. I think they'll do a thorough job, and we'll just have to see where it goes from there.
All right. Well, tell us what your latest piece for Red State is and where folks can find you before we have to let you go here.
You know what? I am going to, and thank you for saying it, because I've written it. I just need to submit it. But it's going to be on why we're seeing all of this anti-Semitism on our U.S. colleges. I'm going to go into a little history of that and some of the reasons why I believe we're seeing that. That should be on redstate.com later this morning.
All right. One more question for you, Chris. What races in the other states are you particularly watching for today? When you're watching the election results roll in tonight, what do you think is going to be the most impactful as far as what we should be watching in Missouri here for 2024?
Well, one, I want to see in Ohio, of course, they've got that abortion amendment, which really, if this thing passes, you can have abortions all the way up to birth. I want to see how that is going to shake out, especially since we're going to have probably an abortion amendment here in Missouri we're going to vote on next month. I'm going to be looking at Virginia. Can the Republicans take full control of the legislature there?
get that taken down and get it to start curing.
Tell me, Kevin, what is the backstory behind Hemp Hooray? Tell us just about the business here.
About 5 years ago, when everyone started talking about marijuana being approved and everything else, me and one of my friends, we started looking into the hemp industry. Seemed more affordable to get into, and so we started in that route, and it's been very, very fast ride. We currently have 2 locations, one in Osage Beach and one in Columbia. Our products that we have are all across the board. I mean, we're not just a true traditional head shop or anything like that. I mean, we try to do more of a boutique feel on everything, but we have not only pain salves and creams and stuff like that, but then we also have some of the alternative cannabinoids, a lot of CBG stuff, few THC things and stuff like that also. We deal with a lot of farms all across the country, some up in Oregon, some down in Florida, up in Michigan, and it's just a good variety of a little bit of everything.
Now, Kevin, as you guys have been in business, are you finding that there's any sort of common misconceptions that you guys are facing at Hemp Hooray with potential customers that come in off the street?
One of the biggest hurdles that we've found in our industry is a lot of misconception about alternative cannabinoids, and a lot of people don't see benefit in them. We try to tell people that if they are a cannabis consumer or something like that, not to just isolate those individual cannabinoids, but actually expand them, add some CBD, add some CBG, maybe some CBN. All these other cannabinoids can get an entourage effect that really can make just an overall better experience. And depending on the issue that a person might be having, it can help with even more inflammation, pain relief, sleeping, everything else.
Forgive me if I sound a little ignorant here, but what is the difference between going to a place like your store versus going to one of the traditional, legalized, legal marijuana dispensaries?
Overwhelmingly, that difference is going to be the cannabinoids that are available at purchase. A lot of dispensaries, marijuana dispensaries, don't really care very much about having infused products with CBD or CBG and all the other alternative cannabinoids. The other industry does seem to only favor THC, which is the psychoactive part, more intoxicating. And while there is a place and a time for that, I'm not sure that should be promoted every day for every person and every condition. I don't think at the end of the day, intoxication is still intoxication. And that overwhelmingly can lead to a lot of side issues for customers and patients and stuff down the road too. CBD and other alternative hemp-derived cannabinoids can really make a big difference when you're consuming them with other cannabis. Those entourage effects are huge. But also, we've developed one of our own pain salves that does have some THC in it. It's great for bone issues, pain, that kind of stuff.
And what's one thing that you would tell a potential customer who's listening right now who might be a little afraid to come in and try some of your guys' products?
Well, we built our store to be comfortable for anyone, first of all. My grandmother's 92 years old. She uses CBD every day, and so we made our stores to be comfortable for any age group. If you have a question about any cannabinoid, we're really confident in the information that we can deliver to any customer. We train our employees really, really well on all the alternative cannabinoids just to make people comfortable with them also.
All right, and Kevin, if you just want to tell us one more time where we can find you guys.
We have a store in Osage Beach in Stonecrest Mall. It's right across from Hy-Vee. And then we have another one downtown Columbia, right up the street from Central Bank in Nashville Night.
Thanks so much, Kevin, for that info. Mark, as much litigation as we've been involved in over marijuana, there's a lot to learn as someone, I'm still learning every day about it here in Missouri.
There's a lot to learn, and it's a thriving industry in this state, and one that looks like it'll continue to grow.
And that's producing a ton of money for veterans, for sure. So really exciting. Okay, I've got to get to this TikTok I saw yesterday. It had me cracking up. I guess the marathon.
Yeah, you sent it to me. That was a good one.
Oh, that was the different one, actually.
Okay.
Was that the pinata lady?
Yeah, the pinata lady. It was a little graphic, but entertaining.
A good Halloween costume. She had candy and everything. But I saw this this TikTok yesterday about the New York Marathon and people who had signs, and it made me think, we've got CBS coming to Mizzou. I'm wondering who's going to have their signs, but I got really excited. This one says, this one says therapy was an option too, as people are running by. One says, run like there's a hot guy in front of you and a creepy guy behind you. My favorite, though, I think, was this inflation one. They said, let's see, due to inflation, what did they say here? If I can get to it. Due to inflation, the marathon is now so ready to see what happens. I do think today has a lot. We're going to learn a lot about, how 2024 is going to go here in Missouri. And I'm hyped. I know people in those states. I know people working on those races. And I'm excited for them and excited to see the latest because, the last time we went through an election, at least I was very disappointed, and we were told there might be a red wave, and we sure didn't get it. So it's so weird now because everyone says, well, we've got these polls, they're saying this, but we really haven't been able to trust those polls lately. And have we entered a new era, Mark, where just the polling means just nothing?
Well, let me start by saying I'm like a kid in a candy store, too, on Election Day. I'm totally into that also. But I think polls have become so wildly inaccurate. About the best you can get out of polls, and pollsters, and particularly the in-the-know political people have been saying this for years, and I think we finally are seeing it. The best you can get is kind of trend analysis. Are you moving ahead? Are you falling behind? The polls themselves are almost useless for snapshots. But, if you take that Kentucky governor's race where the governor had a really big lead and it now appears that it's a horse race. I don't know if it's actually a horse race or not, but the trend in all those polls continued to show it getting closer, which does mean there's something going on that's making it a closer race.
The one that comes to mind for me, I keep cycling back to, is the polls, and believe the polls that you wanted to. When we saw a lot of polls, and they came through regularly, that said your next U.S. Senator of the state of Missouri is going to be Eric Greitens. Mm-hmm. And we saw that over and over again with the margin of error and all that. It didn't come to pass.
It really didn't.
Well, thank God.
Yeah. Well, that's a very interesting point. And I would go back, John makes a very good point. Go back to 2016 in the Missouri gubernatorial primary on the Republican side. The conventional wisdom from polls is that either Peter Kinder or former Speaker Hanaway were going to win. And lo and behold, Eric Greitens won that primary. Didn't win it by a ton. He had four major candidates in that race, and it was all split up. But the polls. You just you take them with a grain of salt. But it'll be very interesting to see what happens in Kentucky tonight because rural Kentucky is bright red, but Louisville has a big voting base. So we'll see what happens.
And there's another one we haven't talked about at all, which is Mississippi.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You have a Republican governor down there who was assumed to be a shoo-in. His opponent is a distant relative of Elvis Presley, even has the same last name, Presley. But there was a scandal down there with the current governor's predecessor and Brett Favre, and a whole bunch of money that went to, I think, a private college / sports complex that Brett Favre had an interest in. And the Democrats have been running that issue really hard.
Big time.
And if you believe the polling, that race has closed and is becoming tighter now. Again, it's just trends. You don't know how close it really is, but it's interesting that race in Mississippi, probably one of the reddest states in the nation, could be potentially close.
I'm going to clip all of this audio about our predictions and play how wrong we are tomorrow, right? All right. Brian, I wanted to touch base with you. Travis texted in, and I have the same question, Travis. He said, could you all explain what a sanctuary city for LGBTQ plus actually means? He said, I know what a sanctuary city for illegal immigrants is, but what is this person? So last night we had a council meeting in Columbia, Missouri. There was a speaker. There wasn't a vote, my understanding. But what does this person want?
Well, we don't know exactly right now. I think it's very important. I do have an updated story on the site, and I'll have more up on 939theeagle.com and kws.com. But I link to the Missouri Young Democratic Socialists of America, and this is basically the chair, this Mel Tully that spoke last night. So I think it's important to note we don't have a draft ordinance. Tully mentioned a draft ordinance, but I've not seen one yet, and it hasn't been presented to the council. It would have to be, I'm sure they're probably drafting one and then sent to the council if they do decide to do that, and then it would be introduced and then it will be voted on at a later meeting. But in a nutshell, Tully basically spoke for about 5 minutes last night, and he is saying that basically that people don't feel safe. He said that the ordinance, this is a direct quote from him. I think I ran the soundbite at 7 o'clock. He said the ordinance would declare the city of Columbia a sanctuary city for the LGBT community, their families, their right to gender-affirming health care, their rights to free speech, and expression, end of quote. Now, keep in mind, there is a state law that's on the books right now involving, the issue of some of this. He is saying this is not an effort to skirt around the law. They would work within the parameters, but, give the authority, the limited authority this person believes that Columbia has in terms of this issue. So a lot there. Now, they're involved in a number of other issues, this particular group. They have marched for trans youth in Columbia. One of their big issues right now, and John and I both reported on it, they have advocated for the campus dining workers at Mizzou to be raised to $15 an hour. That's we'll see what happens on that. But they describe themselves as a, quote, big tent student organization open to leftists of all kinds at the University of Missouri. And then they give a description of what they're looking for: workers, students, young people, members of the community at large, to make real and effective changes in the community. I think, one thing they make very clear is that they believe the citizens of Columbia want this proposed ordinance. So we'll see. I've put a question up on our Facebook page. Haven't gotten too much response yet. Do people want it? And maybe the reason we haven't got a whole lot of response is we don't have an ordinance to put up there right now. So it's just it's a concept. And but
Brian,
I do expect they will present this at some point, possibly at the next meeting.
My question is, and I think there's some confusion out there on the behalf of folks in Columbia, and they heard this sanctuary city phrase, and they stop right there and they go, are we having something with? Are we going to invite illegal immigrants to town? And they're not hearing the rest of the story.
And that's a good point. And again, I'm using the phrase that Tully used, and it's on the actual Columbia Council agenda, sanctuary city. But you're right, because when people think normally of sanctuary city, they probably are thinking about the issue of immigration. But this is this group's proposal. They are using the term sanctuary city, saying it's needed. We did have a Columbia School Board member who stepped down probably about 6 to 7 months ago, and left town because of the bill that passed in this person said, and her son, because of the bill that passed in the General Assembly. But that was something that it was very, very, I'm not going to say it was vague. It was just very general last night. But they probably had about 20 people in the audience. It was hard to tell. I'd say 20 to 25, but all, if not most of them, members of this Mizzou Young Democratic Socialists of America. So we'll see what happens. But it's not been introduced. I think that's very important to note. Not been introduced, and no vote. It was testimony from the podium.
When I think about places that are friendly to the LGBTQ community, Columbia comes to mind. They have large pride events. We had a pride event in Southern Boone. And I'm thinking I've been to gay marriages there. They've got if I'm looking around for Missouri, Columbia wouldn't be the place that I would be that concerned about if I was in that population.
But it's not an ordinance to actually stop or change anything. It's just political posturing. It's designed to stake a flag in the ground, to make a point, to say, hey, look at us, how friendly we are, how welcoming we are, all that kind of garbage that people do that really has nothing to do with making substantive policy change. I mean, if you want to talk about getting pay raises for people, okay, that may be substantive policy change, but I'm pretty sure the Columbia City Council can't tell the University of Missouri what to do.
Well, the university, on this whole issue, the university and WashU in St. Louis said they will no longer provide gender-affirming care, largely because of the legal issues.
And I do think that the concept of Democrat Socialists of America is fading out in light of all the things that have happened with Israel and Hamas, and they're just
Bernie Sanders begs to differ.
I don't know. I mean, I think they're all being very careful about that now, because their far left wing of the party has kind of outed themselves as being, if they're not at least pro murder, rape, and destruction, they're certainly okay with it if they're not in favor of it.
Apparently, Columbia wouldn't be the first city. In just a little bit of research, it looks like other folks, the South Florida city, Lake Worth Beach, voted or something to become the state's first LGBTQ sanctuary. I think to protect themselves from the evils of Ron DeSantis is what they said.
It's red state posturing, right?
And the other, and I'm not aware of the city in Florida, but they did mention last night, Stephanie and Mark and John, that Kansas City has something similar to this. They mentioned Lawrence, Kansas, but they do, Mark, to your point, this particular group does. This is just one of many issues. They say that the issues faced by our community, I'm taking this right off their website, are rooted within faced by our community are rooted within capitalism and its failures. So we'll see what happens on that. But there was no vote last night. Once we get a actual written proposal that I can present, we will have more. But we'll certainly cover it, and we'll see if we'll see what happens if the council decides to follow up on it.
I hate Jayhawks with all the passion in the world, and anytime you're following Lawrence, Kansas, and doing something, you're just inherently wrong.
There you
End
go.
of the story right there.
Rock, chalk, rainbow flag.
Rock, chalk, chicken hawk.
All right. Also here locally, real quick though, John, you had mentioned, and I wanted to make sure I got the number right. So we heard last week from Mayor Fitzwater that the city's looking at doing a development downtown. We're now hearing the city. Well, then we heard the city was in talks with News Tribune, and there was some sort of contract. What's the price tag on the city's going to pay them for that building?
No, the city's still discussing it. They're talking about buying the News Tribune building in downtown Jefferson City, which is the 200 block of Monroe. $575,000 for that building. Tear it down, take the parking garage in the other end of the block out, and potentially reach out to build a hotel conference center site.
I think that location is really excellent. We've talked about it before, and it's always, how do you get people? People want to go to the governor's mansion, they want to go to the Capitol. It's all walkable. So I do like that, but that's a hefty price tag for the city. But also, you don't get much better location than that either.
That's it, and they're now looking for a developer, so we'll see where this goes. They're talking about they could vote this at their next meeting, which is Monday the 20th.
All right. Well, coming up next on Wake Up Mid-Missouri, we are going to do What's Hot with Hannah. Hannah, what's hot today? for What's Hot with Hannah, which means it's 7:25-ish.
Well, it doesn't always mean that it's 7:25, but today it does, so
I
good
want
job.
my gold star. Do I get my trophy?
You know, we normally blame it on guests that we have when we're late, but we never give Mark credit when we're on time when he's here.
It's true.
Oh, yeah, there you go.
It's
Look
true.
at me bringing efficiency to the radio.
I have a story today that I'm pretty sure Stephanie is going to hate, which means it's my favorite type of story. It's Heinz ketchup, which, in my opinion, hot take here, Heinz is the best ketchup company, and it cannot be beaten. And recently, I lost a little bit of faith in them when they came out with their seemingly ranch ketchup mixture. Stephanie, do you remember that?
This was
Taylor
the Taylor
Swift,
Swift.
yeah.
That's so
even
gross.
John's got it.
It's so gross.
Yeah,
is gross.
Taylor Swift was seen in the, Chiefs box where she watches the game with what appeared to be ranch and ketchup sitting right next to each other on her plate. And there was some speculation that she was perhaps mixing them. And so Heinz did a very limited edition, seemingly ranch bottle where they mixed, I guess, ranch and ketchup. And that sounds disgusting. But they're going for some redemption this morning. They've announced that they will be releasing a pickle-flavored ketchup. It's already out in the UK and some retailers, and it will be headed to the US very soon. And according to Heinz's research, they claim that 73% of Americans love the taste of pickles. Not sure how they, did that experiment. But they're claiming that most Americans will like this ketchup. So what do you guys think? Would you try a pickle-flavored ketchup mix?
I know what's going to happen in the bar scene, where the big thing in the bar scene now is pickle shots. They'll combine these
good.
two and make Bloody Mary pickle shots.
Oh, that sounds gross.
And I love pickles, but the concept of pickle-flavored ketchup I mean, Heinz is struggling here. I agree with you, Hannah. It's the best ketchup, but boy, I think they're losing track here.
I think they might be smart. I heard a recent podcast where some business bros were like, we need to get into the pickle industry. I just looked it up. It's a $3.3 billion industry in the U.S. People love pickles. My question, and I'm very nuanced here, is what kind of pickles? Is it dill pickles? What's the flavor of pickle that's going into the ketchup? That's what I need to know.
It's dill flavor.
Ugh. See,
Which-
I'm...
Originally, I was like, that sounds disgusting. But then I got to thinking, if you're eating a burger,
Yeah.
you have a pickle on there, and it has ketchup on there. So is it maybe that outlandish? I don't know.
I mean, a burger with pickle on it, that's like prime. You have to have the pickles. Even McDonald's hamburgers with the little dill chips, awesome.
I got to reading, though, about different versions of Heinz ketchup that have come out over the years. And I was just born in 2000, so I'm going to have to defer to the older folks in the room.
Sheesh.
Here we go.
Did they really release purple and green ketchup in 2000 for the Shrek movie?
I hope not.
Limited edition again, like the Taylor Swift thing, I guess.
That is disgusting.
Another idea that failed.
My life was absolutely changed the first time I had barbecue, and next to the barbecue, they put pickled vegetables, and ever since then, I've been a pickled item fanatic, other than actual pickles, I think. And so I want to know, what's the weirdest thing you've ever, or the best thing you've eaten that's been pickled? I love pickled cauliflower is so good. Pickled onions are
Pickled
really good.
eggs are really good.
Ew, no way.
Pat's Place.
But yeah, I had this salad, and it had pickled cauliflower, and it was delicious. That
Giardiniera, that's kind of a big Italian.
yeah, it's so good. And I think with barbecue sauce with something or barbecue food with something really heavy, it is about that?
Well, our founding fathers didn't design a very messy, efficient process. It's pretty messy and inefficient, and as a result, you saw it play out in front of you. Our rules that we govern ourselves by are not any better, and so as a result, it got a little messy there for a while. But at the end of the day, we got a good guy, a speaker. Mike's going to be great. He's a very smart guy. He's an attorney out of Louisiana. He's been in leadership positions in our conference before. I think he's going to be fine. So we've got a lot of issues that we've got to work on. We've got to put all this other stuff behind us and get to work.
Congressman, talk to us about those other issues. I know initially, right out of the box, you dealt with the Israel defense funding and all, but what's next?
Well, we've got a bill that we're going. I think that the speaker wants to put together that funds Ukraine and our border at the same time. That's going to be. It's a little controversial because a number of our members don't want to fund Ukraine. So as a result, it's going to test him right here. We've got a lot of appropriations bills to go through yet. November 17th, which is next Friday, is coming very quickly. That's our deadline that we've got right now. I understand he's looking to probably do a short-term CR on part of the bills. We've got a bunch of them that are done. We've got a total of 12. We've got 7 or 8 of them done now, and the Senate's got those that we need to get to work to be able to sit down and go to conference on those if they don't like what we sent them and get those moved. So there's a lot of moving parts right now, but yeah, Israel is a big deal. The stuff going on around the country, the anti-Semitism that's out there is very unfortunate because Israel didn't start this. The Hamas and Hezbollah, all backed by Iran, which is kind of interesting because the administration failed to, and nearly, I don't know if they really actually acknowledged that Iran's behind this, but when you talk to administration officials, they will tell you that Iran is behind this. I mean, so for the president to not acknowledge this is really a head scratcher, but especially when Israel is one of our partners. But to see that Iran is behind all this and not acknowledge that is very frustrating. But we're getting there, and Israel is one of our good partners. We're going to stay behind them all the way and continue to fund them and support them any way we can.
Yeah, I've never understood the pro-Iranian bias of the Biden and Obama administrations, but when you talk about like funding in the budget, we're talking about regular order. The reason I think, at least supposed reason we lost Speaker McCarthy was because he did a continuing resolution instead of doing regular order on the bills. At least that's what some guy from Florida said. What's the real opportunity to get regular order on all these bills? And if we do a CR, is Speaker Johnson potentially going to get another motion to vacate the chair by those same folks that made such a big deal of it in the first place?
Well, it's possible, but they're part of the problem rather than the solution here. I mean, we can do the job of putting these bills up there, and then what happens is they defeat those bills because they're not perfect enough. It's not everything in there they want, or there's some stuff in there they don't want. And as a result, as you go through the process, and regular order is allowing people to vote for or against things and amendments that go into these bills through committee and on the floor. And that's what we were doing. The problem is some stuff got in some of these bills, and a lot of them got delayed because of this lengthy process that you have to go through. I mean, there's one bill had 1,000 amendments to it. It takes a while to get through that. And so these guys are very unforgiving from the standpoint that, when they add, and half of these amendments are theirs, and practically none of them pass. So this is a delay tactic that they put in there, and then whenever the funding bills didn't get done, you have to do a continuing resolution to keep the government open and keep going, keep the process going. Otherwise, again, you shut the government down, and which, quite frankly, what was their goal? That was the thing they wanted to have happen anyway, because they were going to get more press time that way. This is all about them being able to go on TV and raise their national profile so they can make money. It's a very selfish point of view, but if you know what I know and you sit where I sit, that's what's going on. I've had some of their members even tell me that this is what they're trying to do, is raise their national profile so they can raise money. And in the process, they were trying to hang McCarthy. And they'll do the same thing with Johnson if they don't get their way. They're not for democracy. They say they're a democracy whenever you have majority rule. And these guys are anything about majority rule. It's all about them.
From D.C. this morning, we are joined by Congressman Blaine Luetkemeyer.
Stephanie, thank you. Mark, John, thank you as well. Congressman, we appreciate you joining us live. I know your district includes Columbia and also Jefferson City, a big chunk of our Boonville, a big chunk of our audience covered by you on the Hill. So 2 quick questions. What are the chances of getting Speaker Johnson either to Columbia or Jefferson City? I know Speaker Boehner was in Jefferson City several years ago. Into the House at 9 our time, 10 your time. The House is going to take up a spending bill, and one of the things Democrats are criticizing in this particular proposal, they say it would cut a 64% cut to Amtrak funding below last year. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's disappointing. I know that in Missouri, we don't look at public transportation as something that we need to be supporting because most people do not take public transportation. That being said, many people on the coast do take public transportation. That's the way they get around. Their cities are so congested that you don't. And for instance, here in D.C., I don't even have a car here in D.C. because there's no place to park it. So people take public transportation, or they take cabs or Ubers. In my situation, sometimes I have some staff driving around. But this is the way people transport themselves, and it's much cheaper, quite frankly, to do that than it is to build all these extra roads and parking places for all the extra cars that you need to have. So it's something we need to take a look at. I am aware that there's probably some waste in that situation, but I think by the same time, it is another one of the many ways to transport people around the country. In our area, we want more roads and bridges and stuff like that, where on the coast they need more railroads and more Amtrak time and space and improvements to those facilities. So, I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I think we need to look at it very carefully to make sure the monies are being well used. Your first part of your question with regards to getting the speaker here in central Missouri, I'd love to do that. My problem is I'm not one of the guys that's endangered here, and so Speaker Johnson is going to go to the districts that have that are swing districts first, other places where he can raise money and get himself up to speed. So he's got a lot of things to do. He's only got 1 year until the elections this next fall, and probably, I guess it's a year from today, actually.
Yes.
So I'd love to. We'll ask him about it, but I know I approached Speaker McCarthy a couple times, and he committed to do that. And at the last minute, somebody else popped up that was on the hit list, and so he went and visited those folks. But Speaker Boehner was gracious enough. He takes a month off during the month of August to just travel the country and go through the country raising money for everybody else or helping them raise money. And I had asked him a couple times to be a special guest for us, and he declined. And it got when he was on his special trip here, he got to the end of it, and he had an extra day or two, and he called me up and said, "Hey, can I swing by your district and help you out? Because I know we were trying to get something together." And I said, sure. So we put some together really quickly for him a couple times. And so, but again, that's a great question, Brian, and we'll certainly give it a shot.
Yeah, Congressman, I know you're busy, but yes, please, I would love to get an interview with you and the Speaker if you guys come. And it was, as I recall, Speaker Boehner and you were at the Steinhaus, the restaurant, the German restaurant in Jefferson City, a nice meal. And then he went to see Lacey Clay's district in St. Louis, and a Democrat at the time. So, Congressman, thank you.
Now,
you'll love Johnson. He's a really good guy. You'll have a great time with him.
Sounds good.
Now, you, along with 60 of your colleagues, recently penned a letter to Johnson about the Farm Bill. What are we hearing about the chances? What are the Democrats planning to do to the Farm Bill? What are you hoping to see in the Farm Bill as that progresses?
Yeah, I talked to Chairman Thompson last Friday, I guess it was, and he is very frustrated with the process right now. There's a group that is trying to minimize some of the funds in there. I mean, initially they tried to cut 30% out of the Farm Bill, which wound up, again, you have to be smart about how you structure these things, because what that does is endanger our farm congressmen. Like all four from Iowa voted against this bill, and they're all four Republicans. In fact, the former chairman of the Ag Committee voted against the bill, because it was silly the way they were trying to cut the stuff out. It's fine to cut some stuff out, but you got to understand where and how to do that. And they weren't doing that. It was a very poorly structured bill, the way that they were doing this, and as a result, it was defeated. So GT is going back to the drawing board on this, and quite frankly, I'm not sure where it's going to go. They'll probably have to have another extension of it for a while until they can get things worked out. But it will get worked out. But it's going to be a long process, and it's not anywhere near the end yet.
All right. Well, it's always a pleasure to visit with you. Anything else you want to add here in the last 30 seconds?
No, we're just busy. People have questions and concerns. Don't hesitate to give us a call. I know travel right now around the world is very difficult for a lot of people. Please be careful. I know our office gets lots of calls with regards to passports and green cards and stuff. I would just hesitate to tell anybody to travel around the world and have some fun, because it is a very dangerous place right now, and it's been ramped up significantly over the last month. Please be careful, and if you do need some help with something, or your passport or State Department issues, give us a call.
We certainly appreciate that. Thanks for joining us this morning, Congressman.
Always a pleasure, guys. Take care.
All right. And John, it's you next. And that would be all, except for what?
Even confused dopers love Christmas.
Oh, yeah. I like that. All right. That's up next on
called, and she said, "What do you mean there's a man in the house? Do you know if he has a gun or a knife?" She promptly called 911 and screamed for the neighbors to go next door. Police reports indicated 44-year-old Terry Trent did have a pocket knife on him and most likely had been abusing bath salts. Walked in through the back door, made himself comfortable, lit the candles on the coffee table, started putting up the Christmas decorations.
My man.
Said he was polite to the 11-year-old and said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. I'll get my things and go." They said Trent had a history of drug charges and now is facing burglary charges. And I knew the rest of that Christmassy story.
Well, if somebody will show up and put up the Christmas decorations, I'm all for that because I sure as heck don't want to have to
There you
do
go.
I mean, really, I'm going to start passing out bath salts to my neighbors and hope they wander in and start helping me out.
Wow, watch what you wish for there. Huh?
I'm clipping
You could have
that
given
one.
them to the guys with the petition who came to the door.
I certainly could have. I haven't seen those guys around Southern Boone lately. I don't.
You
Are they-
scared them away from Ashland.
Thank goodness.
The giant inflatable rat ate them.
Oh yeah, I haven't seen that guy around with his rash or anything.
Man,
lately. I wonder-
Ashland is becoming like the Florida of mid-Missouri.
Oh,
It is.
come on. It is
We
not.
coining the phrase "an Ashland man."
I don't know. I mean, but so what we're talking about is it was the minimum wage petition. They actually knocked on my door in Ashland. They had a petition. They had several signatures on the page I could see. And I thought it was bizarre. We got some texts that people were, the petition collectors were out at the Mizzou game a couple of weeks ago. I haven't heard if they were out this last weekend, but I think that's the only one, Mark, that I've heard of where they're out actually actively collecting the signatures, and they've got to get them turned in by May.
They were walking down High Street in Jeff City soliciting a few days ago. So I think they're all over the place, and they'll for sure get enough signatures, and it'll pass overwhelmingly on the ballot. It's a no-brainer.
Now, presumably, if they have the resources, since we got the decision from the Court of Appeals on the abortion measure, they could go slap that language on the front of their petition and start collecting. I have not heard that yet, but I mean, they could start any day.
Well, there's a whole lot of abortion petitions out there. It's probably a question of which one they're going to take. If, like I said, if they go to the 15-week one, that kind of moderate one, so to speak, that's out there, it'll pass easy. If they put one of the crazy ones on, they might lose it.
And a lot of times you'll get like a phone poll, or they'll do some polling ahead of time. I don't know that I've heard, any rumors about a lot of abortion polling going on. I think nationally we know where folks are at. Exactly what you said. They're for, what was Bill Clinton's line? Safe,
something safe and rare.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's where a lot of people are. But, depending on how those things shape up for 2024, I think it could really impact our ballot. Maybe they're waiting for the vote today in Ohio to see how that goes.
That was just what I was thinking, to see what a bellwether that might be.
Yeah, and that's a pretty far left-wing version. So if that goes down in Ohio, I think it'll give a lot of fuel to a more moderate version. On the other hand, if it passes in Ohio, and particularly if it passes with a substantial number, I think they'll go full bore and try to do the same thing here.
Now, of course, nothing would prevent, because we know that the more really moderate or conservative leaning, I'm trying to think how I would describe this measure. There is a measure to simply add exceptions to the existing ban for things like rape and incest. That's in circuit court. But there's nothing that would prevent Missouri from getting multiple abortion measures on the ballot, just like we had multiple medical marijuana measures.
And whichever one gets the most votes becomes, assuming they're all constitutional amendments, becomes the law of the state.
And California has that rule too, I think, but it's never really been tested in Missouri before.
There was in '76 they did, or was it '80? I don't know. There was one where there's actually a court case that talked a little bit about it being the same election and how many votes each one got. But there's never been a direct conflict where one said X and the other one said not X.
Kind of back to the days of Bill Webster.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a long time. So maybe some interesting election law issues coming up here in Missouri. Also, the Wall Street Journal is taking aim at our very own Senator Josh Hawley. We're going to get into that in the 8 o'clock hour. We are also going to cover the Supreme Court. There's a big Second Amendment case. And while we're all, pro Second Amendment here, the facts of this case are so bizarre and interesting. You're going to want to stick around. Are the walls closing in on Hunter Biden?
slamming a table. Let me be very clear. I don't tolerate that in my life. I'm not going to tolerate it here. And you know what? You shouldn't either.
That is Trump attorney Alina Habba outside of the courtroom yesterday, and things got a little wild. We are only getting kind of transcripts and recounts from the folks that were in the room. Of course, there weren't any cameras in the room, but that is her take on it. And reporters said it got heated. The judge wasn't happy with Trump kind of rambling on and said, I'm not going to listen to your campaign speeches. And it was that's not a good thing for a lawyer to do, right, Mark? Have you ever stood outside the courtroom and
I stood outside the courtroom and talked to the media lots of times, but never said anything like that. I thought the shocking thing was when the judge apparently said, I don't want to listen to what he has to say. I'm like, that's the job of a judge. He's actually he's actually the fact finder. He's supposed to listen to what the witnesses say.
Trump talking about things that were relevant to the case? That would be, I mean, the judge could tell you that it's irrelevant.
I mean, I guess when the judge comes in and says, you've already committed fraud, that's done. Now let's just talk about how much I'm going to fine you and take away from you. And I guess nothing is relevant except for how much you're going to be fined. But come on, you got to give a defendant lots of leeway.
I got a question for you, Mark, on this case. New York case law is a little different, right? There's no requirement to have a victim, is there?
No harm. All you have to do is show that there was a fraudulent statement made, and assuming everyone, I mean, think of it this way. If everyone knew it was a fraudulent statement and nobody relied on it, and in fact, everybody laughed about it and said, this is a joke, we're not going to do anything with it, you're still guilty of a crime in New York.
It's ridiculous.
So how do you do comedy? I mean, if you own a comedy club business and you do comedy and you make an exaggeration or you say something, that would be an official part of a job. It would
How do
be
you
an
do
official
radio?
statement.
How do you do radio? We never exaggerate here on the show, do
Never.
we, John?
The law itself has never been challenged at the federal level. There's a lot of discussion that this case could end up being the test case to throw that entire structure out.
But ultimately, it's going to go up on appeal, and I just think Ms. Habba, didn't do her client, Mr. Trump, any favors yesterday. Mark?
Agree. You cannot do that if you are laying a case to go up to the appellate courts, because you kill your credibility and you turn the judges off against you. And
in Missouri, you would maybe be potentially subject to a bar complaint for that kind of language.
Absolutely. You can't disparage a judge. It's an action against the administration of justice, and lawyers are held to a higher standard on that. Although some people might question that here and there.
Another lawyer crossways with the Wall Street Journal this morning. Now, I saw this bill that he's proposing, and I was not pleased. But now the Wall Street Journal's got my back. Hannah, I think we've got some audio of our senior Missouri senator.
Think straight. Corporations are not people. And there is no reason why corporate America should control this country. I've got news for these corporations, these woke corporations. We are not going to surrender this nation to the cultural Marxists in the C-suite. No way, no how.
Now, that was a few months back, our, again, senior Senator Josh Hawley, and he has recently come out with some legislation where he wants to reverse Citizens United.
It was maybe arguably the biggest victory for free speech in the modern era. Mm-hmm. It allowed, it was actually one of the reasons Hillary Clinton ended up not being president, was the after effect of Citizens United. And now Hawley doesn't like who's contributing money. So suddenly he's against free speech. This is the problem inherently with populism. If you have no principle, you're against what you don't like. So if you have a principle and you say corporations get to speak, then it's a principle and you take the good with the bad. If you say, well, I don't like what that corporation says, now they shouldn't get to speak, you're not having any principle. You're just saying, I don't like something and I'm against it.
But this is kind of, what we've seen from Hawley, especially with in relation to Section 230 and the tech companies. He doesn't like what they're doing, so he says, we need more government regulation of them. So I guess I'm not totally shocked, but yeah, I always considered Citizens United a big win for us.
It's a huge win. And by the way, just as a question, when did Republicans start being the party of big government. I always thought we wanted less government, and every time I hear Josh Hawley speak, it's a new government program, a new government restriction, a new government tax credit. What happened to actual, like, small government conservatism?
That is a very good question.
Citizens United goes back to what? Gosh, 10 years ago before it all went before the Supreme Court.
Yeah,
they made
more
the
than
ultimate
that. Yeah.
decision.
It's been longer than that. But I think there are, Mark, Stephanie, and John, there are a number of issues. He definitely has a populist trend that is appealing to, obviously, I mean, he's done very well electorally in Missouri, but there are a few issues where I've seen him agree, or maybe they just happen to agree with Bernie Sanders. I mean, one was on the price of prescription drugs, particularly the diabetes medication that is so expensive. They've agreed on that. There was also, in President Biden, if you remember when he took office, as I recall, he said people would get a $2,000 check. Ended up being $1,400, and Bernie Sanders and Josh Hawley wanted that to be at least $2,000. There were some that wanted to be at $5,000 direct payment. So, but that populism, we've seen it with him at times, and also on the issue of the duck boat. We can't forget the duck boat tragedy in Branson or Table Rock Lake that happened back, I believe, in 2018, because Claire McCaskill was still in the Senate. That was kind of a populist approach on that. And essentially, I talked to him after that. He basically filed the same bill that Claire McCaskill did. They added a few things, but basically it was the same bill. So we'll see. But I just, I know sometimes, Mark, you don't like what he says, but in terms of him on the ballot next year, I think he cruises to re-election. I'd be shocked if anybody comes within 20 points of him on either side of the aisle.
I agree. I think it's very unlikely certainly I think it's very unlikely he even gets a substantive primary challenge, so he'll be the Republican nominee, and I don't know that Democrats can prevail against him in Missouri, at least not with the slate of candidates they have right now. But, you just have to kind of wonder when you're – was it two of the four things you talked about, Brian, were Josh Hawley and Bernie Sanders united to push the government to the left? Well, that's pretty concerning to me.
And we like to, talk about politics as if it's on a linear, from left to right, and you're on this line. But you hear quite frequently that line actually starts to bend, and the radicals on both sides, it's actually a circle. And so they come together, and I think that's what we're seeing is when you get both ends bending around, you really get back to the same place. So, it's not a good look that the Wall Street Journal in their opinion section is singling out our senator. And I wish we could get back to issues like low spending and small government. Also yesterday, and, John and Brian, I want to get your take on this. We're getting some leaks, I guess, what they're calling leaks from this Nashville shooter's diary. And it actually, I think, came from an online conservative kind of influencer content creator. I was real skeptical yesterday when it first started to come out. I'm like, is this even how do we rely on this?
I thought Mark's take on it was interesting. Mark kind of commented on this when we were off air talking about it, that no people were too concerned about the content of it.
Yeah, the officials in Nashville, this is all down in Nashville, all the government officials, every single one of them without exception, had nothing to say about the content about targeting Christians, targeting whites, her trans status, any of that. They were entirely focused on, oh my God, it's a leak. How horrible it is that this we're immediately launching an investigation into the leak, not into anything else, into the leak. And I thought that was really very telling on how progressive Nashville has become. Again, a red state with a progressive core and
circling the wagons.
Yeah, I mean, that's more important to shut down information to people than it is to talk about why somebody went out and did a horrible act.
And a number of groups have sued to try to get access to these pages. It's still unclear how and why and when these 3 pages leaked out. But now I think it all needs to get leaked, because if you saw those 3 pages and if they are what we think they are, I mean, just terrifying and scary stuff. So, let's let it all see the light of day. And that way we can, try to understand these people who are just mentally ill. And I know that, that's probably an impossibility. But at the same time, I think leaking 3 pages, I think we've got to see it all.
And there was a time frame in there, if that's correct, like a time about when the person woke up, and they mentioned a designated parking spot. But yes, let's let the process play out, and we'll see. But the what I read in there was just, to put it mildly, deeply troubling. Troubling.
And I think the city's with respect to all the litigation going on to get this released, the city has taken a hardcore approach in opposing any of it being released. They're trying to stone it into secrecy because they don't like what the content is.
But for the safety of everyone, I mean, it's clear from just the little bit we know that it was premeditated. And you always hear after these things, oh well, they should have known, or somebody should have known, and so But I do think getting kind of a window into these folks' mind, and it could help us be more prepared.
But you know as well as I do that if the shooter showed up with a MAGA hat on, we would have already read the manifesto and it had been condemned across the globe. And the Nashville people would be talking about how we have to stifle all this free speech because these people are terrible. It's purely politically driven in this case.
Oh, yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. And it doesn't fit the narrative.
It doesn't. Every shooter should be a white male Republican. And when one's not, we don't want to talk about that.
It changes the narrative, doesn't it?
Let's not have that discussion.
They don't know what to do about it. All right. Well, we are getting ready for the morning bell this morning. Business News with a Twist, brought to you by Mark Ellinger. It's time for the Morning Bell Business News with a Twist. This morning with that twist by Mark Ellinger.
All right, well, let's start with the futures. The Dow and the S&P are both down, continuing down days from yesterday. NASDAQ's just up a little bit, maybe something positive in the tech market, although not from Uber. Uber missed its mark big time yesterday. Even though their ride volume was up, their profits were down. They missed what they were expected. Market's punishing them for that. Speaking of Ubers, Las Vegas, Vivid Seats just spent $240 million to buy Vegas.com.
Really?
Vegas.com is the one of the primary ticket booking sites in Las Vegas. It's one of the highest search-rated sites out there if you're looking to get tickets in Vegas. And Vivid Seats, $240 million to buy it. That's
just on a domain.
Just on a domain so that they get the access to those ticket selling and the contracts that come behind it. But so that shows that people are betting on Vegas. Now, we'll see how it goes after the F1's been out there. And, we'll see if the next 3 years of F1 racing in Las Vegas make a difference or not. But, the market's all over the place. And employers are nervous. There's a new trend out there. Do you remember the Great Resignation?
Oh, sure.
You remember that? We were all worried we wouldn't have enough people to fill jobs. Then we had COVID and everybody was gone. And then we had all the hiring to come out of COVID. Well, employers have a problem. Employees are not quitting.
And they want them
they want them to quit because in the course of the change of the market, the change of industry, and in the traditional, you've hired up and staffed coming out of something, now you see some retrenchment in the profits and some retrenchment in the markets, and they're wanting to rebalance their workforce. And yet, unlike a few years ago when people were hopping left and right, people are not quitting their jobs. Thanks, Joe Biden. Bad economy and worries about economy are keeping people from quitting and looking for new jobs.
Or retiring.
Yeah.
I mean, and all you have to do is go on strike and you get 25% increase in your pay. It's worked for a lot of people this year.
Yeah. See how many of those jobs are left in a few years.
When they automate the line even more at the car plants.
And this is not in a single area. It's across the board. Employers in everything from, finance to manufacturing, pharmaceuticals are seeing turnover really slowing down, which is a harbinger of, unfortunately, a recession. It's bad economic news because when people think the economy is really going great, they're happy to quit a job to take another job. When they're nervous about it, they want to stay put, and that seems to be the new trend, and that's very concerning, I think. And it's a problem that businesses don't want to fire people either, because then you get a reputation for firing people. So they're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place.
Then it goes back to the whole deal of those people who are of that mindset also are not spending.
Right, and I need to grab this audio. I recently heard some data that if you have an A player, that A player at your business will bring up the folks around them by 15 or 25%. But if you have a B player, if you have someone that you really wish would quit, not only are they, bringing down the productivity for themselves, but they actually bring down the productivity of everyone around them more than, having a good player on the team. And so they said it is so imperative that if you've got those B players that you get them out of there. And what you're telling me is employers are having a hard time doing that.
They're having a hard time doing that. You start to see a few layoffs. If you'll recall, last Friday when the employment numbers came out, they missed what it was expected. They saw a drop back, and then the 2 prior months were revised downward by 100,000 jobs. Unemployment went up. All the warning bells are flashing out there. I'm not sure anybody's paying attention, but if you think about the polling on the presidential race, the single biggest impediment to Joe Biden is the economy. And while the pundits talk about how great it is, the reality is people are really nervous right now, and that affects your pocketbook, it affects your job, and it affects who you vote for.
I hope you're right, and I guess we're going to get a test of that, the first test on this most latest Bidenomics tomorrow in the elections, and I think we'll get the first look at how that economy is really making people feel nervous. But if they're nervous,
people are voting right now.
Yeah, they actually. They certainly are. But if they're nervous, I guess my fear on that is that they pick the status quo rather than change. If people are really feeling nervous, no. Mark
Nope.
shakes
I
his
mean,
head.
politically, the
polls
history
at
of
all.
politics is bad economy is bad for the incumbent. Good economy is good for the incumbent. Everything else doesn't really matter historically from a presidential perspective. If the national economy is bad,
some folks in off the texter. Y'all are some big-time Steven Crowder fans. Yes, it was Steven Crowder who leaked the 3 pages of the Nashville Shooters Journal, and yes, we will give him credit for doing that. So thanks for the heads up there, friends. Also, we had a question. We were talking about initiative petitions, and someone said, hey, if one of those people accosted me on the street and I signed it to get them out of my face, can I take that back? And yes, Mark, there's a process for withdrawing your signature.
There is a process. It's there's a state statute that expressly talks about it, and you can go through that process. Can we put that? I don't know if we can put that statute out so people can actually see it or not, but there is a way to do it. You have to sign a document. You have to file it. I believe you have to file it, if memory serves me, before the petition is submitted.
Correct, which will be in May, so you've got a while.
Well, that's the deadline.
Yeah.
The last day it can be is, May 5th? Is November 5th the election next year?
That sounds right.
Yeah, it's May 5th. It's always the same date in May as it is date in November, and it's always on a Sunday.
But come on, there's a lot of lawyers involved in that process. Has a petition ever been turned in more than a day early, a couple days? How
yeah,
really?
There have been petitions. There was one within the last 3 or 4 cycles that was turned in a month early. Wow. Over a month early.
Which one?
Is that right? Was that right to work?
It's a test.
I'm trying to remember.
Well, right to work was a repeal
or a referendum.
Referendum. I'm trying to think. May have been minimum wage got submitted early.
Okay.
There was one that was submitted really early, and everybody was kind of shocked at how early it had been submitted. We submitted one a number of years ago to deal with the earnings tax, and we submitted that probably a week early.
Okay, well, moral of the story, if you have signed and you suddenly realize that you didn't want to sign, go ahead and turn in your withdrawal if that's what you want to do. You need to get it in before they submit the petition. Okay, some other things going on here in mid-Missouri. We always encourage folks to get involved and to participate. And, there's a lot of reasons to be riled up these days. I know John Martin is having a campaign kickoff, I believe, this evening. Caleb Rowden is doing his campaign kickoff, I think, next week. You can get on some of our local, websites and get the details for all of those. But be watching for those as they, as those folks start to ramp up. And then also, I know in Columbia, we've got, I think, a hospital board of trustees spot that's being appointed, and then there's also some stuff going on with city council that you might be able to run for if you're in the right ward. So just be aware of those opportunities. Of course, there's always lots of city boards and commissions here in mid-Missouri that are looking for folks. I know Ashland is always looking for good volunteers. So we encourage you, if you're feeling riled up or unsure or nervous about this current state of the world, we need more people like you, and we need folks involved. So be sure you've got your eyes on that. Now, something that's got me real freaked out is this ballot stuffing case, and I think they're voting actually today.
In Bridgeport, Connecticut.
And so it's a mayor's race. It was Democrat on Democrat ballot stuffing. It was in their primary, but we've heard for years, there's no election fraud. Everything was made up, and you kind of hear both extremes. Apparently no votes were cast legally, or every vote was exactly perfect. Now, Mark, you did some observing after the last election, and I think you could attest here today that not every vote went in exactly perfect.
And lots of votes don't go in exactly perfect, unless you're in Madison, Wisconsin, in November of 2020, when every ballot was absolutely perfect. We saw that. But we have seen in Democrat primaries, including in Missouri and St. Louis a few years ago,
Bruce Franks.
The Bruce Franks case. Yeah, I mean, we have seen ballot stuffing occur predominantly in primaries. There was some false ballots in North Carolina that was in a Republican primary.
And I will say it wasn't Bruce Franks accused of ballot stuffing. It was his
opponent,
and he was basically granted a new election.
And he won that handily. And it was not his opponent. It was possibly family members, because it was Penny Hubbard. I don't think she was ever implicated, but go ahead, Mark. You were mentioning North Carolina, because I was thinking of a Kansas City case as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's just been it's not common, but it's not uncommon to see these kinds of demonstrable election fraud cases that either require new elections or change the results. This thing in Connecticut's just totally bizarre, though, because they're leaving the guy on the ballot. They're going to have a general election today, and then who knows what happens afterwards.
Because part of the problem is, these things happen very quickly, but also a whole new election is expensive, and then the turnout is completely different. If if suddenly we, you just have that single election on a day that you're not used to voting. And that's kind of what happened in the Bruce Franks election. They got a new election a couple months later, and the turnout was completely different. So as the judge, I would think, too, you're thinking, okay, how do I remedy this harm? And that's why election fraud is so frightening, because sometimes once the damage is done, there's not a lot you can do.
And this judge in Connecticut specifically said, under the law in Connecticut, I have no authority to move the general election date, period. I cannot do it. And if you can't move the general election date and you can't call another primary, what do you do?
You just let the results stand, I guess, by law.
Well, yeah. I guess if the fraud guy wins, maybe you have a post-election challenge. Maybe, I don't know.
I don't know but it's certainly going to get a lot of attention. But if you guys remember, Jay Ashcroft was on the show, the Secretary of State, strong proponent of voter ID. Probably, this has been, Brandon was doing the show, I'd say 2-3 months ago. But he alleged on this show that John Rizzo won his House seat, Mark. You might remember this.
Yep.
In 2010 because of voter fraud. And because of that, he was not going to go. This is Ashcroft saying this on air. He was not going to go to the Missouri Times. They were going to have a banquet that night to honor John Rizzo. He was not going to go because he basically said the only reason he won that seat was because of voter fraud. He's talking about the old House seat. Of course, that wouldn't have anything to do with the Senate, but we've seen that before. But in this thing in Connecticut, the people that watch MSNBC at night, that watch Rachel Maddow, they're not going to have any idea what you're talking about. This is not something they're going to cover, but it is interesting because it is a Democrat who's raised this issue. But it is newsworthy. It certainly is. And we'll see what happens on that. I just don't, the Franks race, that was a judge that got involved, and he lost the first time. And the only other point I make, Mark, you're talking about turnout. Turnout means so much. People forget in 2000, Jim Talent was the congressman from the 2nd Congressional District, ran for governor, darn near won. Really came close. I mean, had to suspend his campaign because of Governor Carnahan's death, and all the campaigns were suspended a couple of weeks. But in the primary in August, because Talent had given up his seat, it rained. My father and mother live in St. Louis area, and they were telling me it was just very poor weather that day. Not very good. Todd Aiken's people went out and voted. Todd Aiken didn't raise a lot of money. Frank Flotron was going to win that seat. Everybody, They put all the money on Frank Flotron. Big time, you remember him, Mark. Todd Aiken won that seat. So weather also has a lot. We forget about that sometimes, but those Republican voters in the 2nd District, the Tea Party types, they went out and put Aiken in, and he was in that seat.
Just because of Todd Aiken, we got Claire McCaskill.
And that's for sure.
He served 6 House terms, and then and who knows what would have happened in the Senate. But that interview with Jaco changed everything.
Well, and Mark, you were out in Nevada this last election day, and it actually snowed, and they were shutting down some state offices.
We had a tremendous storm. Las Vegas had huge winds and rain, which held down the day of election turnout. And, of course, that's traditionally Republican turnout. But in the north part of the state, they had a blizzard. Carson City, the state capital, I think they shut state government down when it reached like 3 feet of snow on the ground. And there's a university up there. University of Nevada's up in that part of the state. All the students early voted because they were encouraged to. And all the Republicans waited to vote on the day of the election, which was the blizzard. And the net effect was, in that part of the state, which is traditionally very Republican and was Adam Laxalt's power base, that part of the state voted Democrat for a U.S. Senate because of the early voting on campus and the lack of turnout because of the weather. It goes to show, if you're going to have early voting, then we need to do it too. You can't just let the other side do it.
And Sean Hannity has made that point about if that's the law, people have to do it. But Republicans traditionally like to wait. But Mark, you bring up a very good point. But in fairness here too, I've covered several hearings at the Capitol over the years. Peter Meredith is questioned Secretary Ashcroft about it. The state representative from St. Louis, they don't agree. They do respect each other. I didn't notice any like personal attacks, but Meredith has really tried to press him on specific examples of voter fraud. He has brought up Franks. I don't remember him bringing up Rizzo at the Capitol hearing. He definitely brought it up on the show. And by the way, Rizzo was not himself ever implicated in anything, but the implication was that voter fraud helped put him into office. He was never implicated, so no wrongdoing there. But it's just there aren't that many examples that, and most of these House seats are in the Missouri House. A lot of them, quite frankly, are not even they're not challenged. The Democrats, a lot of them in the inner cities, run unopposed. And really, the big election is a primary, and same as Republicans in outstate Missouri. But when you do have a close race, Franks and Hubbard, 2016, that was a big deal, and that was a judge that came in to change that. So we'll see. It is an interesting topic.
In 2000, we had dogs vote in St. Louis.
That's true.
And if you'll remember, a dead person voted, and the only reason they caught it was he was the former alderman of the city of St. Louis, Sorcus Webb Jr., cast a vote in the election a month after he had died.
Yikes. That was interesting. In I forgot about Sorcus Webby. Red Villa died big time, and Tom Villa was his son. I believe Tom's passed away, former state representative. Red Villa, when I was growing up, huge name in St. Louis, huge name in Democratic politics. But I think it came out documented. No indication of voter fraud, but he was on the active rolls to vote years after he passed away, as I recall. So part of the problem, too, is these clerks need to do a better job in some cases, and Cherie Tolson-Reich has pointed this out, of cleaning up their roles. And Brianna, I think, does the best she can. The problem is you've got these students at Mizzou and Stevens and Columbia College. They move in and out, and a lot of times they don't change their registration. So that's another thing why our voter turnout doesn't seem as high as it could be, because you have a lot of people on the rolls here who don't live here anymore.
You're right. And I mean, I think when some of these Democrats hear, oh, well, there was this one instance, they sometimes you get like an eye roll. But I think what we heard about Rizzo was he actually won his race by one vote. We've had several House races in the last election decided by fewer than, by a handful of votes, by fewer than 100 votes. We've also, in Columbia just a couple years ago, we had a race tie on the nose. And
Correct.
So one instance of voter fraud could really make a difference.
And you're right. You're talking about Roy Lovelady and the former councilman Carl Scala. There was no indication of voter fraud on that, but they did have to, they gave them the option. They could do a coin flip. They decided to do a re-election, and it was a very close race, but Lovelady prevailed in that. But the point you make, Stephanie, is a good one. Every vote counts. Every vote counts. But in all the years I've covered, and I know you guys have been around, I don't ever remember an actual tie up until that third ward. And it went down, and then they recounted. They had a couple of recounts, and they all came back tied. So it goes to show you those machines got it right. They did. And then in the I want to say it was either August or November they did the recount.
Yeah, we had a complete redo. And I know John's pulled up the place that I like to go when we're talking about election fraud.
Heritage.org, and it talked about some of the cases back in Boone
joined by Raven Harrison tomorrow. She's always got some hot takes. And what I love about Raven is that we don't always agree. Although we're all very conservative, we have some differing opinions, especially about what's going on in D.C. So I can't wait to get her take on today's elections and how the direction the country is going. Mark, what's in your fridge for leftovers today?
Well, you kind of teased it a little bit earlier. We all have this kind of push and pull about how government spends our money. And generally, as fiscal conservatives, we don't like it. Well, Boeing is expanding up in St. Louis, and the state has just given them $37 million in taxpayer incentives to expand between tax credits, deal closing fund, $37 million to do a $230 million expansion. So what is that? Like 15% of the cost of the expansion for a private business is being bankrolled by taxpayers. We all like seeing business grow. It's good for the economy. It's good for our communities. But when's the time when the state should just have low taxes and say the reason you should be here is because we have low taxes, not because we throw buckets of money at you to build?
Yeah, well, the flip side is we're going to send the incentives to the big major manufacturers. What about the promised tax rebates to the citizens that lawmakers did one round of and have kind of talked a good game ever since?
Yeah.
I struggle with this issue because, if they're not going to land in Missouri, they, a lot of these businesses are saying, I'll just pick up and move somewhere else. And these states who have low taxes and a lot of citizens, have the money to throw around. And so we kind of get into this race to the bottom or race to the top for incentives. And I want Missouri to compete. So I struggle with it.
Better tax policy, lower taxes will solve that problem. We just don't want to talk about that.
It's a hard one. It's a hard problem to solve. All right, John, what's in your leftovers?
Kind of in the sports world, Mizzou men's basketball team off to a great start, dominating Arkansas Pine Bluff in the season opener at Mizzou Arena.
Wait, who?
Arkansas Pine Bluff.
Okay.
Missouri men over the Golden Lions 101-79, and the football Tigers 16th in the latest poll for us. Number 14 Tennessee Vols coming to town. That one will be on KWS, and we'll have the game. A couple SEC East rivals, some big implications, and we all hope